Hey, and welcome to Social Church Live. This is take 2, our interview with Josh. Hopefully we are officially live. We were having the most amazing conversation. Josh was throwing out insights left and right about Easter and church world. And so hopefully this is going to work this time. So Josh, how are you doing today, man?
I'm great. I'm excited about round 2.
Round 2, let's do this. Hopefully it'll be as insightful as round 1 that I don't think anybody was seeing. So, man, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, where you're coming from in the world, and then the church that you're a part of. I'm going to go share this into a couple groups real quick, and then I'll be right back. But I'm excited. You guys are going to absolutely love the insights from Josh.
Awesome. Well, my wife and I live out in East Providence, Rhode Island. We have an 18-month-old son who is currently teething, so was up last night for a while. But my wife and I moved out here about 5 years ago to start the church with 2 other couples, and we live, I think I mentioned East Providence, Rhode Island, but we love the area here. We both kind of grew up in the Indianapolis area, but we are now Pats fans. For those of you out there who didn't have a chance to listen to that, but Ryan and I had a good laugh about that. But so we moved out here a little over 5 years ago to New England. It's one of the least churched areas of the country. And we've been trying to figure out what does it mean to help people to know Jesus and follow him, just like many of you guys are doing in a number of different parts of the country too. So I am excited to share not what we have figured out, but what we screwed up a lot on and what we are currently still learning, especially after this Easter season. I know that many of you guys just got done with probably one of the biggest Sundays of your guys' year, and you're evaluating it and processing through, like, what do you do now with guests, with those who have been coming for a long time. And I'm excited for us to continue the conversation.
I love it. Man, we are now officially live. Like, this is actually working. So I've got it shared in the Church Marketers group, the Church Marketing University group. So we are off and running. You guys are going to love this. Yes, Zachary is saying, let's get this party started. And I so wish you guys were here for take 1, because Josh was just dropping like truth bombs, like left and right. But one of the big things that you had a big takeaway from your Easter services, because I always love hearing what other churches are learning, what is like went really well and what like maybe didn't go well at all. But for you guys, you moved your big Easter outreach a week before Easter. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you did that? And did that go well for you guys, or would you do something different next year?
Yeah, so for us, typically our Easter weekend was jam-packed full. We would have our Good Friday service on Friday, and then the next day we'd have a massive Easter egg hunt that expands across 3 different communities that we are in. And really reason why we do these events is order for the church to go out into the community, let them know that we're here and that we care about them. So we don't pass out Bibles, we don't have worship music or preach or anything like that. It's really just about them being able to meet the people of the church and know they are just like me. So for us, one of the things that we really wanted to do is we realized that like the day before isn't really enough time for people to consider actually coming to a potential Easter service. So we had it the week before, and it was supposed to snow. Thank you God, it did not. But we also did something really different, as we decided rather than expanding and doing these massive events, like the year before, I think we had like 3,500 people at across the 3 locations. We actually made them smaller. And we had about 2,000, and it resulted in the relational connections with people being so much greater. So there were many individuals that ended up checking out the church and considering it because there was more of an opportunity for it to be more of a conversation. You get to have longer conversations when you don't have thousands of people in one place. So the other thing that we did, which was a little bit different, is for our people, as we promote what to do during this season. Like, of course, we want them to volunteer to connect with the community, but we also want them to invite. So the question is especially over the course of 2 weeks, we're asking them to invite people to the egg hunt. We're also asking them to invite them to our Easter services. Where do we want to maybe put more of a push or more of an emphasis on? So we actually decided to not provide cards for them to invite them to the egg hunt. We just assumed and trusted that people who had experienced it before were going to want to come, and we required pre-registration, and it kind of worked out. A little over 2,000 people came without us having like physical invite cards or saying like, hey, invite in a really intentional manner. Instead, what we did is we asked all of our people, of course, to serve at it and to invite the friends if they wanted to, but really we wanted them to invite to the Easter services. And it was amazing. I feel like what we saw on Easter Sunday really reflected the emphasis of people coming on Easter and bringing their friends and family to that, rather than pushing for them to come to one or the other, really helped. So we were really excited about that.
Yeah, and you were also saying you guys did a big push on pre-registrations for the Easter egg hunt. So
we did.
I'm a huge fan of kids pre-registration, the whole plan your visit and pre-register stuff online. I feel like our society is moving that way. So did that work well for you guys?
Yeah, so one of the things that was the most beneficial regarding that is when we have, several hundred families that are pre-registering for an event, one of the things that we asked and we kind of put in the waiver is like letting us communicate with you to obviously give you deep details about the event, but it also gave us an opportunity for us to invite them and to connect with them about coming to Easter and future services before they ever even came to our outreach event. So it was amazing to hear many families that had already been considering the church, and they just really needed another invitation from us in order to take that leap. So having pre-registration allowed us to connect with those who came to our event and invite them to Easter before they ever even came to our Easter event. So we've been having conversations with families and singles and those that came before ever coming, which has been awesome.
I love it, dude. I love that intentionality of just making sure the event is so intentional that it allows for relationships. That fed into pre-registration, that kind of fed into making your event smaller and more like able to develop those relationships. So you're able to bridge that over, and you gave you a week even between that event and Easter to make all of this much more intentional of driving people to actually showing up for your Easter services. So that is a huge aha moment. And speaking of aha, Jennifer's saying, aha, I found you. I was at the wrong page. Yeah, guys, we had a snafu. We were live talking incredible insight from Josh for about 15 minutes before we realized nobody was live. Like Facebook, it didn't go. So if you would help us, if you'd share this so people can find us, we had to kind of redo it a take two. So that would be a huge help if you start tagging people so they can find where we ended up here. So, man, great stuff. Josh, you said next for your Easter, you guys typically run about 400 people. You doubled on Easter. You had 800 plus there at your church. But one of your big insights was that your people knew what to do, because you had been really intentional at developing this welcoming culture. So tell us, how were you able to identify that our people got it, and how did you see them jump into action on Easter Sunday?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a shock for us to see the amount of people who came, which was a huge blessing. It was one of the things that just wanted to say too is that God was currently obviously doing things in people's hearts in order to get them to come. So we had a part to play in it, but it wasn't the whole thing. But what was so neat to see is that many of the individuals who weren't scheduled, they had invited their friends to come to it. So they were the ones that were bringing their family and friends and those that they could, because they could say, hey, I can sit with you. So sometimes even having those that are the best at inviting, having them not serve on a Sunday actually really resulted in them being able to bring the people with them. But the other thing that was really neat to see is those that weren't serving being the ones that were still having conversations with guests and helping them go to the information center and introducing them to their friends and family. So that for us is evidence that our people know what to do with people who are new. And one of the things that we kind of talk about on the first impressions team is knowing like what's best for the guest. So being able to know like, hey, if someone's coming on in, like what's best for them, like using discernment. I know we'll talk about it. It was just awesome to see what our people were doing.
So I think the big question for other church leaders watching is, how did you develop a culture like that? Like, how did you get to a point where you had people like spring into action and you were able to welcome double the attendance because you had created this welcoming culture? So give us some insights in what you've been doing to develop that culture.
Yeah, so a couple of different things is one, if I'm honest, when the church first began, we had a relational DNA that was present there. That was probably primarily just from the people of the church that just loved being together. Like when you love being together, a lot of things can happen. So the church began to connect with each other. And then one of the things that we found is that as we got bigger is that what began more organically had to stay with intentionality. So one of the things that we talk about with our team is being willing to do for others what's already been done for you. Wow. So being able to cast the vision that like there was one day where you came inside of here and you didn't know anyone here. And many people who are coming into your church for the very first time, like God did a ton of work on their hearts to even bring them into your parking lot. One of the craziest stories that I remember hearing is that there was a guest who came to our church and it was at our old building. And she said that she drove into the parking lot and stayed in her car and drove there for 4 weeks.
Wow.
Every week she would come, drive, stay in her car, because she was so afraid about being judged, about coming inside of there and what that would mean for her because of just past baggage. And she said, As soon as I stepped in and met the people, everything changed. And what I love about that is that when someone comes on in, our people have learned that it's okay to leave a conversation with someone that you already know in order to do for another person what they don't have. They don't have any relationships yet. They don't have the people that are caring for them, but we already do. And I think that when a church is healthy, it not only is looking for guests who are new, but is also inviting them into a community that is real. And people want to be a part of a church and a community of people that genuinely love each other. So there's been times on Sundays where there's someone who's not serving that is having a conversation with someone and they notice that someone is alone and might look new. And they go, hey, like Holy Spirit prompts them and they go and they have a conversation with them. That's one of the things that we talk about is we have a prayer that we call praying for one. It's not something that originated with us, but we talk about it as a church on a regular basis, that we pray that God would give us one person to share his love with. And whether that takes place in a coffee shop, there's been times where I've walked into a coffee shop and it felt like God's been like, hey, you should go talk to that person. I'm like, I don't want to. I want to read a book and I want to drink my coffee. But like, it's training your heart to be obedient to Jesus' small nudges. And when you're doing that already in the other avenues of your life, then God continues to open opportunities to do that on Sunday. So the more that we talk about it, the more that we help our teams to see like this is the win, the more that they are more willing to do that. And we share stories like during the huddles that we do before each service. One of the things I'm already doing now is for this upcoming Sunday is I already have emails and texts from guests who are first time. So I'm going to be sharing clips of that to help my team to know this is what happened when you sacrifice for another person, when you went out of your way to help someone know that they are loved. And that helps reinforce what the win is.
Yeah, dude, that is so huge. If you guys could put that in, because I'm going to butcher that line later. I'm going to be like, dude, Josh dropped this amazing line. Do for others what someone did for you. How did you say that? Is that?
It's do for others what has already been done for you.
If you guys could put that in the comments, because I want to make sure we highlight that. Like that is so huge. If your church culture can get that, because sometimes we are the recipient of it, but for whatever reason, we don't train our people then to go and do likewise, go and replicate that. I think Zachary's mentioned that in the comment, like replicate what you've experienced. And so, man, that is so powerful. So good stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Another way to adapt that is because I know many individuals that are probably like, I wish my church was like that. And their maybe church experience when they first came wasn't the type of welcoming environment that they wanted. So another way that you can even think of that is do for others what you wish was done for you, like create the culture you want to see. And if you can do that, man, there is so much power in being able to create a welcoming environment and being that person for someone else that you really wish was for you.
Yeah, and I love it. This came out in the article that you wrote for Church Marketing University as well. Like this whole idea of hospitality is not just the job of a select few volunteers, but it's part of making this your entire culture. And I really think that came out when you said our church was able to handle doubling because our entire culture, like all our people kind of sprang in the action. They knew what to do because this was a culture thing, not just a like, oh, these are the 3 people that work the information desk, right?
Yeah.
So, man, that is absolutely huge. So I'm curious now, and you already gave us insight about your sharing stories and testimonies, but what are you guys doing strategically to to make sure that this next week isn't a drop off, right? Because sometimes in church world, we have these huge events, and then the next week, everybody's on vacation. Volunteers are like, hey, I'm done. I did my deal. Like, as opposed to looking at it and be like, man, this is a huge opportunity. Like, all those relationships that started, like, this is actually maybe more important than Easter, because the whole point is ongoing relationship and discipleship, not just one-time event. So what are you guys doing?
So this might sound odd. I hope it doesn't. But I think a lot of times after Easter is our focus is primarily upon those that came, right? Mm-hmm. It's the guests that showed up. And I think the church, I know that our church, one of the things that we're trying to do is to thank the volunteers who made that happen.
Wow.
And I think that as like probably the best thing that churches can do right now is spend some time, even today, thinking through who are the individuals that were a part of your church that really made it happen, and thanking them and helping them to see why what they did had eternal value. And if you can do that, is that they will want to show up again. They will want to be that face that they already met, to be the same face that they met last week too. They won't want to have another week off. They will be so excited to come back. And if you can create a culture where the people love to be with each other and the volunteers say, I don't want a week off. No, as a leader, you should give them weeks off. But if you can create that hunger and thirst inside of them, then the people who are going to be coming back, they will have already experienced that. They won't be thinking on Easter, they were just being nice to me because it's Easter. They will have felt the fact that they genuinely care and love them. So that's just one thing, is spend some time this week thanking everyone that made that possible. Make it personal. Be thinking through, like, what did the people have to sacrifice that were on your team in order to be able to be a part of this? What did they do over and beyond? And whether it's volunteers that aren't paid, and also people who are paid. Like, I know that Andy Stanley says, like, everyone's on loan, whether you're paid or not. Yeah. So being able to thank your people is huge. The other thing that I would say is that as church, like, we're trying to be realistic. That, like, most likely God could do something crazy, but we probably won't have 800 people next week, and that's okay. So one of the things that I think that we've started to do is we have different lists of people. Like, we have a list of people that is very clear that these are out of town guests, and it's like our follow up with them is going to be very, very different. So many people who come to your church on a weekend that is just that is like an Easter or Christmas or something weekend or on vacation is usually for a couple different reasons. One is because their family invited them to their church, or they are looking for a church for their family. Interesting. Right? So, like, someone would be coming. There's been individuals who came to our church on Sunday who they have family in town and they're Christians in another state, and they're going, I want my family who lives here to come to a healthy church. So our follow up with them should be, how can we help you get your family here? How can we not invite you to come back because you live in Ohio, but how can we help reach out to your family who lives locally and they've been maybe hurt or damaged by the church? So you have to know that follow up with the different people who are coming needs to look different based upon the groups of people that you have. So we use emails and texts, and being able to capture stories enables you to know, like, what is next for that person. So one of the things that we're doing this upcoming Sunday is something that we call a connection lunch. Many churches do something like that, but it's in order for people to hear the heart of the church, what we are all about, and learn about some opportunities of getting connected. So it's another relational environment to come to hear this is what we are all about, and we won't twist your arm to do anything. And there's free childcare, and there's free Chili's, there's free catered food. Just come. So we're spending a lot of time trying to take advantage of the opportunity to invite, to say, this would be your next step if you were considering maybe making this.
Okay, you cut out there at the very end, but I think I got it. We do something very similar at Summit Park. We have a welcome party, so free barbecue, free childcare. It's literally a party. You have fun, and then also it's a big connect event. So for churches out there, I think it is a note. If you're not doing like a big relational connect event the week after, like maybe your big event, make that as a note for your next event, or maybe next year an Easter, or try to get something on the calendar here as soon as you can, because it is, I think, a great strategic move to say, hey, we had this big event. Now there's a great opportunity to come connect, eat some food, connect with people, and then go continue that relational journey with the people who came on Easter. So one of the last question, then I've got two questions from Church Marketing University members I want to throw your way. But in your article, you talk about teaching volunteers the why is so important, not just the what, but making sure that they're using discernment. And so they have even the flexibility to maybe adapt what they're doing. Not that they're just a robot following rules, but they're kind of empowered to flex and to understand, because they understand why they're doing it, not just, hey, this is what I do. So I loved that discernment tip. So why don't you walk us through that a little bit more?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we are trying to train our people, like we're thinking of what do they need to know in order to fulfill the thing that we were asking them to do. It's equipping your people. But as we are empowering people, the why behind that always demands that you capture someone's heart first. So, and before you ask someone to carry the weight of what you're doing, you need to make sure that they feel the burden. So as you're asking someone to connect with a guest that they don't know, before connecting with their friend that they do know, they need to feel the weight of why it really, really matters. So being able to talk about that on a regular basis is huge. But the discernment piece is, like, we might say, all first-time guests, we want them to go to the information center. But trusting your people means that you need to train them that I trust you to know that if if their body language is saying, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to go anywhere, I'm uncomfortable, then they need to be able to have the freedom to say what's best for this guest. And then have the freedom to know, like, hey, like, I chose to not bring them there because it was enough for them to look me in the eyes, let alone go and talk to someone that they don't know. So teaching your people to have discernment there really empowers them in a way that nothing else can, because now you're not saying, hey, I want you to do this the same way every single time. It's, I trust you with people that God wants to come to him. Yeah. And that shows that there is a huge responsibility on each individual who is serving to grow in emotional intelligence and discernment. And it's our role as leaders to kind of help them to go, like, all right, let's do some examples. If someone does this, if they respond this way, what might be a good discerning point there to know what to do with them? So there is, like, role play that we do, and it's just trial and error, but we do some shadowing. Like, we have people apprentice through an intentional onboarding process. And then we ask them, like, hey, what did you see as I interacted with that guest? Why did I not ask them if it's their first time? Why did I instead ask them how long have they been coming to BridgePointe? Because I've asked someone before if it was their first time and they went, Josh, I've been here for 6 months. And that doesn't feel very welcoming if you don't know the people who are currently there. So there's little tidbits there, but teaching them discernment helps to empower them to not be a robot, as you mentioned, but to really connect with a human.
Yeah, I love that. So much good stuff that I could just pick up on it. The apprenticing, following, empowering, teaching people the why, giving them the vision, letting them feel the weight of what you're calling them to do so they understand how important this is, that all that stuff helps take ownership, helps train them up. So, man, you guys are really dialed in. I love everything that I'm hearing there. So 2 questions here from CMU churches. And then if you guys watching want to throw questions at Josh, we can rapid fire at him, because this guy just has so much wisdom. I love this interview. So here, one of the questions that came in from CMU members, I think this is common among every church, is how are you moving people from, hey, they're starting to attend, to volunteering? And them serving. So and I know that could be its own interview, like in and of itself, but do you have any tips of, like, how you guys are intentionally moving people along? Because I think there's a lot of churches watching that be like, we would love to have all these volunteers and people stepping up. We can never find these magical volunteers. So any tips on that front?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're currently doing is, one of the big benefits of our outreach events is that we need 150 plus volunteers in order to pull those things off. And a lot of them serve and some of them don't. So you already have a pool of people who said, I'm willing to serve one time. And we have someone on staff here who first served at our egg hunt several years ago who were just a part of the church. And that was their first time ever serving. And it was someone who followed up with them from the egg hunt that said, how was your experience with serving? They loved it. Then said, hey, would you consider being a part of a team and having an intentional leader that is able to have an I see in you conversation, to be able to say, this is what I see in you that you could do for others, what's already been done for you. And this is the difference that it could make. Makes a world of difference. I think a lot of times what people have is that they have a fear, those who don't serve have this fear of missing out on a service. So especially on Sunday mornings, I had someone once when I was asking, hey, would you be interested in potentially serving? They went, well, I'm afraid of missing part of the service. And my question to that person when I was talking to them was, have you ever had a chance to share the gospel with a child before? Like, be that person. They went, no. Like, okay, have you ever been the first person that someone met when they haven't been to a church in their entire life? No. Have you ever had the joy of helping walk someone through like grief and focusing on the wrong things and finding hope and peace in Jesus for the very first time? No. So whatever that might be, I just kind of followed up with saying, you are already missing out and you don't even know it. And people who are coming who aren't currently involved with serving is that there's a piece inside of them that is always going to feel discontent when they're on the bench. And being able to help people to see is that you were made to help people to know Jesus. That you have a part to play in that inspires them. So this doesn't sound all that unique, but you as the leader have to be the one that goes after people and invites them. It can't necessarily just be an email blast or a thing on stage, though those things do help. Is the most beneficial thing that lasts the longest is when you, the leader, go up to someone and says, I see this in you that you can make a difference for eternity. And I want you to be a part of my team. And when leaders do that, man, that becomes personal and now they take ownership of it. So I would begin to even spend a couple minutes this week to say, who are people who aren't involved and what does God see in them? Because maybe you don't see it in them yet, but what does God see? Ask him to reveal that to you. And then schedule a conversation with them. Just say, hey, I would love to talk to you about that. And I would be, think about like structure really helps. Being able to go in with a plan saying, this is what it would look like for you to be on that team really helps provide some security with people. Example, like we say, we don't ask you to serve every single week and you're not serving during every single service. So that really helps them to know. Most people think like, I'm going to serve all Sunday, every Sunday. I don't want to serve with kids. I don't want to do that. It's like, you don't have to. You can serve in this area. Those are just a couple of things off the top of my head. We're not perfect at it. We are still learning it, but that I know is what touches hearts.
Yeah. So, man, so good. So much richness there between creating that culture, really driving home the joy of serving. Like you're leading with the why and the stories, the impact that they could have, not that, hey, you need to be doing this, and you're creating that culture. And then there's a lot of churches inside Church Marketing University that there's kind of this solo leader, meaning like they planted the church and they feel like, hey, I'm still running at this solo. And so I feel like for your message for them is like, they need to start doing that. They need to identify a couple people who stepped up on Easter and like get them as developing leaders. And then their job then is to have those couple people then replicate that, in kind of those conversations. And then if you can get somebody to serve once, then it's the leader's job to follow up with them and start unearthing what that person could be in the kingdom of God, in that more personal, ongoing relationship, discipleship with them, just like what we would talk about with a new visitor. And when that level of personalization and discipleship is having, you're going to duplicate volunteers and leaders all throughout your church, that culture. So, man, so much good stuff. And I don't want you guys to miss that kind of whole, because sometimes we need like a step-by-step, on that. Right. You nailed it on that. So the next question was this, and it was kind of going back to that, your article that it mentioned that we should help volunteers see that what they do is about a person, not a task. And I'm going to quote here. So my question is this: how do we help them see? What does that look like? Josh was really great at explaining kind of really practical on the first 2 points, but we felt like that point was a little bit vague. So any more specificity you can give on like, how do you help a volunteer see that this is all about people, not a task. And I think you've already done that in terms of really leading with the stories, but anything else that you would throw out there?
Yeah, I would say that it begins with how, like, what you point them to as the win. And so, like, there's been times before with our cafe team. I was like, coffee's great. I know that creates a welcoming environment for people, but I'd rather the coffee be awful and you love the people who come up to the cafe.
Wow.
So helping to continue to reinforce for them, like, where is the win at, and what does that practically look like for them? And also, as a leader, you have to really think through, like, what would happen if all of a sudden that task, like, why does that task, how does that influence people? So an example, like, why do you have a program? Why do you have a connect card? What if all of a sudden your cafe was gone, or your parking team was gone? Like, being able to continue to ask why, and what does that result in? So here's an example. One of the questions I have with people who just pass out programs, which is a very simple task, is when you first came here. So sometimes you have to frame it in the term of them first coming and their first experience. Put them in the mindset of a first-time guest. When you first came and walked into the auditorium, what did you do? I sat down. Did you know anyone? No. Did someone come up and talk to you? Yeah. How'd that make you feel? Made me feel like I wasn't alone. That was an auditorium host. Would your experience been different if they hadn't done that? Yes. Okay. What else did you do after they left? Well, I looked at the screens. Do you remember what you saw? I saw something about a connection lens. Didn't you end up going to that? Yeah. You know that there's a team that make that slide. What happened if that wasn't there? Okay. What else did you do? I read the program. You know who reads the program? People who don't know anyone, who aren't having conversations. So we gear our program to help talk to people who are new. Connect cards turn Sunday into Monday through Sunday. It enables us to follow up with people. If we don't have their information, we pray that enough motivation happen in them internally and through what God has done to bring them back, that their experience was so overwhelming. But if they actually get that in their hand and they decide to fill it out, we can follow up with them during the week there. So being able to help them to see how it always connects to a person. You have to be able to think, whatever task that you're doing, how do you infuse relational DNA into that? And just framing, like, how you talk about stuff. Like, you don't open a door, like, you don't hold open a door, you receive a person. So always being able to bring it back to the person that is there. Like, you're not passing out a program, you're informing a person. So keep on bringing it back to the person, and they'll eventually realize that it's all about people.
Dude, that is so good. It reminds me at Summit Park, when we were developing up volunteer teams, there was a season where we kind of went through, like, we needed almost job descriptions, because we got to the point where we're scaling so much that, like, our volunteers basically need job descriptions. And then we also wanted for every, team to have that win defined. And I felt like when I kind of observed the team kind of go through that process, a lot of us define the win as a task. And I kind of had to step back and say, no, a task can't be the win. So, like, for us, like an auditorium host, that the win isn't to get somebody seated in the auditorium. That's their task. Their win is to help a person have a great experience in the service, right? Yeah. So now part of helping them have a great experience is finding them a good seat, but it might also be helping them get connected with some other people around them or have a conversation with them. So when you define the win as not the task, which it's more about the person, everything kind of starts to change. So, man, that's a huge insight for churches, especially if you're kind of going through that process of, hey, we're gonna do job descriptions, we're gonna talk about a task, but then define the win relationally. What is your relational, person-centric outcome that you're wanting, not just like what task are you wanting them to do? Man, there's so much good stuff in that. And let's take one question here from Danielle, and it was saying, we struggle with getting people to move from serving to leading. How do you sell the vision for doing more than the job? So it sounds like maybe, and I think Danielle, this is common to a lot of churches that would say, we have, not that you have robots, we have people that show up and do a task, but we can't get them to say, hey, I want to step up and lead the hospitality team or lead the kids, that classroom. So Josh, what would you say to Danielle?
one of the things that I would say is that the best way for someone to want to begin to lead is to have experience being led well. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when we have a first impressions team, guest services, wherever you want to call it, there's so many people to care for and to invest in that it is difficult for us to really spend time to develop them as a person. And someone who is a team member, like they first learn how to lead themselves. And then a leader leads others. And then like a coach might lead leaders. So there are different skill sets of what they have to have in order to be a leader. There are some competencies that need to be developed there. So, but before you can even get to that point, you have to know how to lead yourself. And it's our role as leaders is to help them to know how to do that. So the best case that I would say is that begin to identify, a couple individuals that you think have leadership potential and just begin to pour into them intentionally. Ask that maybe you guys can get together once or twice a month to be able to talk through first impressions things and gain their wisdom and insight and help them to begin to look for evidences that they get the vision, right? And begin to cast that vision if they don't. So are they talking more about, as you mentioned, like tasks? Are they talking more about caring for people? And as you have an intentional onboarding process with that, what's going to happen is they're going to come to a point where they're going, I know how to lead myself and I've done this well. And they need to know that there is a next step, that there's another opportunity. And sometimes they just need to be invited into that. So it begins by you investing into them and developing them well, and then inviting them into a process, not a position. So I mean by that is inviting them into a process to say like, hey, we have intentional onboarding process for those that could potentially be a leader. Would you like to be a part of that? It helps you to know whether or not that is going to be a good fit, but it also gives them an opportunity to see it, taste it, experience it, be trained in it before saying yes. Many people struggle saying yes at the very beginning because they don't know what it's like. They can see what it's like to pass out a program. They can see what it's like to do some of those tasks or even some of the relational parts. Like they get connecting with yes, but leading people and caring for them and coaching and training them, that requires another level of being able to be invited into conversations they maybe weren't in before. So giving them a season to check it out and inviting them into the process really, really helps.
Yeah, and I would say, if I had to guess, I would imagine about 98% of churches would sadly kind of raise our hands and say we don't really have a leadership onboarding process or a leadership development process to invite people into. Yeah. Right. It's kind of haphazard and it kind of maybe happens by accident. And I think for a lot of churches and maybe Josh, we come back and say, what does a leadership process look like in a future interview? But if people want to get to know more of your resources, even your church, why don't you tell us how people can connect with you? How people, if they're like, man, Josh is just incredible. How do they get more of your wisdom?
So a couple of different things. So thank you for the kind words, and I think that this is also something that we are still learning in this process. I personally have made a lot of mistakes. So the things that I am sharing with you isn't because I got it right on round one. It was because I got knocked out several times and I had to get back up. So my hope is that those that are watching, if you feel a little discouraged, my hope is that just get back up and keep trying. But wanting to connect with me, our church is BridgePointe Christian Church, and it's in East Providence, Rhode Island. You can send me an email, josh@bridgepointechristian.com. I also have a website. It's called youngchurchleaders.org, and it's all about developing the leader's heart. So that focus is primarily geared towards young church leaders, but it's less how-to, so less of what we're talking about here and more about helping develop your heart as a leader and as you're leading others.
Wow, such good stuff. And as soon as we get done here, I'll drop some of those URLs in the comments so people can just link over to that. I believe we also have those linked up in your article on Church Marketing University as well. So you guys, great stuff, man. This was an incredible interview. So much good stuff. Thank you for taking the time out to not only do take one, but to do take two. And I think this is really going to encourage a lot of people. Like you said, I really love what you said. Like, hey, if you feel like you kind of got knocked down, like just keep at it, keep going, be encouraged. and get better time and time again, and you'll keep making progress. So thanks so much, Josh, man. We're going to have to do this again. This was incredible.
It's a joy. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. God bless, man.